Quilting swirls in thinner borders and sashings helps make this design even more versatile. Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from quiltingismytherapy.com, and welcome to the third video in the Mastering Swirls Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series. Throughout this free video series, I'm showing you the ins and outs of quilting swirls and sharing tips and troubleshooting ideas so that you can be successful with this awesome design. In the previous videos, we have learned how to quilt the swirl design, we've learned some variations of it, and in this video, instead of quilting those swirls so that they meander around an area, we're gonna line them up in a row and use those in those thinner sashings and borders on our quilts. While it might sound more difficult, I promise it isn't. In fact, some quilters find it easier to learn new designs within defined areas, so this just might be your swirl jam. Not only am I going to show you how to adapt that swirl for those thinner borders, I'm going to touch briefly on the ribbon candy design, another great design for those thinner borders and sashings. I'm going to show you what it looks like on a sewing machine and a long arm, and be sure to stick around to the end because I'll tell you how to get your hands on some free quilting diagrams and tips. So let's get to it. First up, let's talk about skinny swirls. This tends to work best in areas that are 2 to 3 inches wide, just enough room to quilt the swirl, but not so much room that I'm dealing with a lot of unquilted areas. Let me show you how the slim swirls come together, and then we'll quilt them on our class panel. I've marked a couple lines to kind of mimic the border that I'm gonna fill in, and I'm gonna start by quilting my swirls. Starting towards the middle of the border, I'm gonna quilt my first swirl by quilting that curl and echoing back around. I'm not going to echo my way all the way back to the other side. I'm going to stop once I approach the edge of my area. Then I'm going to quilt my next swirl so that it goes out in front of that first one, but faces the opposite direction. So if my first swirl faced left, I'm going to quilt my next swirl so that it faces right. Then I'll echo my way back out, filling in that border as much as possible. The fact that these swirls alternate direction is what can trip up some quilters. Our brain sometimes has trouble processing mirror images. It's like, I got it, I don't got it, I got it, I don't got it. If you're struggling with that, just pause, take a moment, and kind of trace out that next swirl to help you visualize how it goes together. So since my last swirl faced this direction, I'm gonna quilt my next one so that it goes out in front and faces the opposite direction. I'm trying to quilt the swirls so that they fill up that area as much as possible without running them into the seam. Let's quilt a couple more swirls. As I'm quilting these swirls, I might find myself worked into a corner. For instance, here I came back a little too far and I don't have quite enough room to work my way out. I'm just going to travel back along that line and continue on. Quilting the swirls so that they alternate direction is what kind of helps them hook together better and fills in that area more completely. But of course, you might prefer quilting it a different way, and that's totally fine. Now, as I'm filling in my skinnier borders or sashings, there are certain times when I might run into a corner. For instance, maybe the border works its way around the quilt. Turning the corner with this design is actually pretty easy. I'm going to keep going until I hit that border corner, and then just quilt my next swirl so that it goes the next direction. So up here I have my border corner, I can see it coming. I'm just gonna continue on until I hit it, and I'm gonna quilt that swirl so that it fills in that corner as much as possible. Echo my way back out and around, and then stop once I hit that inner corner. The goal with this design, of course, is to fill in that border as much as possible without leaving big unquilted areas. It doesn't matter which direction your swirl faces when you quilt it in that border corner. Just fill in that area and move on. Once I've done that, I'm simply going to quilt my next swirl so that it follows the border. And then continue on quilting my swirls so that they go out in front of each other and alternate direction. I just love how it takes that beautiful swirl design that we might have used in other areas of the quilts and put it in a border to add a beautiful look. Now that we have an idea of how the swirls go together in those skinnier borders, let's quilt it on the custom panel I designed for this challenge. We're going to be filling in the area here with our swirls. You might notice that it already looks quilted. Well, that's because I've incorporated the swirls into the design of the fabric. Learning how to quilt this design is as simple as following the lines. I like to think of it as training wheels for quilters. It's a lot easier to learn the design when you can follow the path. So let me show you what it looks like to quilt this on the Longarm quilting machine. I'm gonna go ahead and start quilting along the lines of the fabric, quilting that swirl that faces one direction, and then quilting the next one out in front facing the opposite direction. Even though we're following the lines on the fabric, I still want you to look ahead of the needle in the direction you're heading. That's gonna help you see what's coming up and keep the quilting closer to being on the line. Don't worry about keeping the quilting perfectly on the lines. That's practically impossible. Instead, use those lines as a guide They're simply there so you can see where to go next, so that you can get the hang of how the design goes together. Instead of worrying about the quilting being perfectly on those lines, focus more on keeping the lines smooth. That's going to give it the look of perfection, even if it isn't perfect. Even if your quilting comes off of that marked line, when you're done and you step back and you see that whole quilt, you're not even going to notice that. On this panel, we're quilting those swirls in a curved area. Since each swirl is its own little section, you can easily wrap it around areas like this. So remember, the next time you're looking at a quilt with skinnier sashings or borders, think of the swirl design. It just might be the perfect way to add a curvy look to those areas of your quilts. Since we're talking about skinnier borders and sashings, let's talk about another design that's perfect for those areas, the ribbon candy design. This design can be a little bit tricky if you've never quilted it before, and it's because it has that mirror image, that alternating direction. Let's see how the ribbon candy goes together before we quilt it on our panel. Starting from one edge, I'm going to quilt a line that curves out and back, kind of making like a backwards S. From this point, I'm going to continue on quilting that line that curves out and comes back to almost touch the previously quilted line. And I'm going to keep doing that, quilting my line that goes out and back, moving along the border until I reach the edge. At any point, if you're not sure where to go, just use your fingers to trace through the next steps and continue on. Another thing that really helps is to put your eye where you want the line to go. So as I'm quilting, if I want my line to curve out and come back to this point, that's where I'm going to look as I'm quilting. The big, beautiful, curved portions of this ribbon candy gives it its signature look. Really focus on quilting that shape so that it goes out so that you can come back. Quilting that line so that it doesn't curve out enough will create a design that doesn't progress evenly. So for instance, when I'm here, I want to go out and come back. Sometimes we get a little bit too nervous and we don't go out enough, and we get something that looks like this. There's nothing wrong with that. The only problem is that it prevents us from continuing on. By not going out far enough when I quilt that loop, I'm creating a design that doesn't progress evenly. If you happen to do this on your quilts, don't worry. Just stop, think through the next steps, and continue on. It's gonna look fine. But as you're learning the design, really try to make yourself go out to come back. If you're trying to quilt the ribbon candy design and you're struggling with it, don't be discouraged. I put together some free downloadable quilting diagrams. Print those out, trace over the design until you get the hang of how it goes together, then you'll be able to quilt it on your quilts. Now, let's take this design and quilt it on our panel. I've also incorporated the ribbon candy design into the fabric. Quilting along the lines of the design is as easy as looking ahead of where you're going and trying to keep those lines smooth. Being able to quilt along the lines will help you get the hang of the way the design goes together so that you can use them in other areas of your quilts. Now what I've done with the ribbon candy is instead of giving you the path the whole way through, I've alternated spots with lines and with outlines. It's kind of a way to practice the design in little increments without having those lines as your training wheels. As I was learning how to quilt this design, I felt I would never get it. I'd practice and it just wouldn't click until it did. And once it clicked, I was able to do it. So even if you're quilting along and you're just so sure you're never gonna get it, I promise it will click and you'll be able to do it. But I'm telling you, if you have struggled with ribbon candy, I promise, just practice the design over and over. Eventually it just clicks and you'll be quilting ribbon candy over all your quilts. If you like the idea of quilting along the lines to learn the design, then you're gonna love this training wheels fabric. I designed each of these prints so that you can quilt right along the design to get the hang of how it goes together. Each kit includes fabric for the top, the backing, and the binding. The idea is you quilt that whole quilt by quilting along the lines and all the designs. By the time you're done, you'll have a beautiful whole cloth and you'll have learned some new quilting designs. In addition to the Swirls training wheels, I've designed other training wheels as well, from feather meanders to wood grains to wishbones. To learn more about those, just click the link in the description box below or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. Now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the custom panel I designed for the video series, fill in the areas highlighted in red with the designs of your choice. You can quilt along the lines in the fabric or come up with your own design ideas. This is also the perfect time to finish up the whole outer white portion of your panel. You can quilt echo lines in this area like I did, or come up with your own design ideas. And as always, I've put together free quilting diagrams that will help you with this design. And if you need a little bit more help, a little bit more instruction, you can check out my expanded resource PDF. It's chock full of quilting samples, step-by-step illustrations, and even more tips and ideas. To find out the information on both of those, just click the link in the description box below or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. If you've liked any of the videos in the series or any of the free quilting diagrams and PDFs I put together, I hope you'll give the video a thumbs up. That just helps YouTube know that you like it and helps other quilters find it as well. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you're one of the first to know when new videos come out. And I'll be back soon with the next video in the series where we're gonna learn how to quilt the beautiful, elegant, gorgeous swirl chain design. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.